Hello, good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Clusters Talk. My name is Bianca Ragami, and we will talk today about private financing for clusters and projects. We will explore options to access funding sources other than public financing. So that will be private financing, and we'll attempt to raise awareness about other funding sources than public funding programs. We will discuss how to search for them and how to access them for clusters, SMEs, other types of projects. And I just want to remind everybody that this is the event happening every 2 weeks. So it's part of the bi-weekly online meetings brought to the cluster community by the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So thank you again for joining. I will get you acquainted with the agenda in a second, and I just want to make sure and to tell everybody that this will be a very useful and instrumental session, I hope. So we will be expecting questions from you. Briefly about the agenda, we will hear some news from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. We will hear the introduction from the European Commission, and after that, we will delve into the panel debate. We will have 4 prominent speakers, and we will end with funding opportunities again from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So that's brief about the agenda that will follow very soon. Some housekeeping rules: do unmute yourself and do keep your microphone off unless you're speaking, and we will kindly ask you to join our debate by raising your hand, and we will give you the floor. And we really encourage that, not just using the Q&A function to ask questions, but also to join us live if you have a question, if you want to maybe share your experience. So that will be very, very welcome too. Please note that this session is being recorded and will be recorded the entire time. So do keep that in mind, but do not get discouraged to ask your questions because of that. So thank you again for joining, more and more of you here. So that's it about the housekeeping rules. We kindly invite you to join the debate, and whatever the issue you have, please feel free to participate as well, and let's make sure that we get most of the session, each and every one of you. Let us move to the next slide, and let us hear from the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. And I want to give the floor to Nina Hoffman.
Many thanks, Jamila, and good morning to everybody. As always, we have some news to share with you. First of all, maybe if you've already seen it, the European Cluster Collaboration Platform has launched a new tool, Trend Universe, which is a strategic foresight instrument for EU cluster organizations that should help you to get insights into future trends to help you build strategic competitiveness advantages. So have a look at this tool. It is useful to better understand what are currently the trends, for example, in the 14 different industry ecosystems, and what impact can they have on your cluster organization. And you can also review relevant trend assessments made by other clusters as soon as the tool is populated with the analyses. This is a tool for the ECCP Pros users, so don't forget to fill in your profile so that you become a Pros user to access this Trend Universe. And on the website you find more information about what it is, how it works, and there's also a tutorial training video on how to use the tool. So look into this on clustercollaboration.eu/trend-universe to start exploring. Then we want to remind everybody, if you're interested in international matchmaking, you have the possibility to go to Taiwan. The deadline for the application was extended to the 24th of April, so apply by Monday if you want to matchmake on the topics of ICT, semiconductors, digital industries, robotics, AI, renewable energies, sustainability. You have all the topics listed here on the slide. It's an event with keynote speakers. Will have networking session and of course matchmaking opportunities on the 30th of May until the 1st of June. So don't forget to register. Or if you're interested in going to Morocco, similar dates, also the 31st of May until the 2nd of June. The deadline for clusters to apply is also extended until Monday. The deadline for SMEs is still until the 22nd of May. Here, the topics focus on agri-food, clean tech, renewable energy, ICT, and textile. So have a look at this event if Morocco, if the North African area is interesting for you to matchmake. And also last reminder to register for the Clusters Meet Regions and Matchmaking in Finland, which will happen next week. There we will talk about raw materials and sustainable approach to them, focusing on circular economy and digitalization. Our Clusters Meet Regions events aim to bring together clusters and policymakers to learn from each other and see how we can use clusters to strengthen the industrial ecosystems and develop economic support. And one highlight of this event is also a visit to the Kittilä gold mine for 50 mining sector professionals. So if you're interested in that, don't forget to register and come to Finland. And last but not least, currently the European Commission is at the Hanover Trade Fair, which is happening right now. And tomorrow, on the Thursday, the topic of the day is industrial cooperation. So pitching sessions from clusters, there will be a talk about doing business within in Ukraine, and a panel discussion on industrial cooperation through EU networks. So if you're close to Hanover or you're interested in going, there are free tickets for visitors of the EC stand. You see the link here on the slide, and my colleague will also put it in the chat. So have a look at it if you see it feasible to come. It will be very interesting. And with that, I think many opportunities to look into, and I will stop here and give back to you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Nina, and for those many opportunities that you have listed out and reminded us of. And I will now want to move to the introduction, to the sort of a keynote of our session. I want to give the floor to the team leader at Cluster Policy at DG Grow, Marek Przeor. Marek, thank you for joining us, and we are all ears.
Thank you very much. Let me set the scene for all this discussion today. The main purpose of this meeting is to raise awareness about other funding opportunities than the EU. But before I will present you exactly what are the funding opportunities available. So here you see everyone went very much in relations with cluster managers in the EU. I hear about supporting clusters with EU funding. This is all available, particularly right now. On this web page, you can find all possible programs which are in the direct or indirect management from the Commission. The most known is, of course, Horizon Europe, but there are many others, and I encourage you to, on a normal, on daily basis, check what are the opportunities, because calls are published every day, and I think this is exactly the moment when, after all design phase, we are now in the phase of implementation. So calls are being published, and the clusters are the ones who are expected to implement the objectives of this call. So this is one. Another one, of course. Next slide, please. Is the cohesion policy funding, and for this in 2021-27, 392 billion euro is in these programs. This is shared management, and on this web page, you see all the operational programs, and this is very important exactly right now, because all this process of negotiations with the Commission between member states, managing authorities and the European Commission has finished. All programs are adopted, and right now is the process where the committees, steering committees of the operational programs are preparing calls and are launching the calls. So if you are from your, particularly from your territory, if you are interested in the in some projects related to SME entrepreneurships, research and innovation, digitalization, or skills in business or infrastructure, then go for this. On this web page, you will see exactly operational programs across EU. And next slide, please. And of course, we shouldn't forget about Invest EU, the leveraging instruments. The toolkit includes guarantees, equity investment, and capacity building. So on this web page, you can see as well the particularly SME windows. This is a very interesting tool. You can see that the 11 billion euro of InvestEU fund resources should attract additional private investment through guarantee and equity funds by the multiplier of 13. This is the aim. So from 11 billion euro of EU funding to make 145 billion of investments. Next slide, please. We have prepared as well a web page, access to finance. You can search any different funding sources. So I encourage you to look at this. And that's it about EU funding today. We don't want to talk about EU funding today. We don't want to talk about public funding because, next slide, please. I want to encourage you to look at this report on the survey of access to finance. This is prepared by the European Commission together with the European Central Bank. And the findings there are very interesting, and they are, you know, we all know that due to inflation, the increase of cost of materials and energy, 90% of over 15,000 surveyed companies reported that they have increased of costs. We know it, but as well, they of course experienced increased interest rates, and 20% of them face tighter collateral requirements from banks. So basically, this is something like a trend which debt financing is increasingly relevant to SMEs, although rates are increasing, and this creates the issues, as well as collateral requirements by banks are increasing. So if we turn to the last page of my presentation, some of you might know this slide. We have this ways of using clusters for so the clusters can channel the EU funding like we do it Euro clusters or in a SUP1 projects, or for clusters being beneficiaries for building capacity. But here I would like us to concentrate how clusters can be knowledge provider to how to access the finance, be the service provider of access to finance, and then by clusters, how clusters can do the mix of private and public funding to enable financing. So I would like to concentrate on this, what I put in oval, rather than what is in green. In green is public funding. So I would like this debate today concentrate on possible other funding and financing sources than EU or public. The ones which are crowdfunding, seed, venture capital, own resources, or institutional investors, institutional corporate investors, and commercial investment banks. So with this, I would like to invite you to our debate, and the mix of our panelists is excellent because we have cluster managers, we have the cluster managers who are service providers of financial services, the ones who are intermediates and consultants for funding. I hope this debate will be very interesting, and I would like to concentrate exactly on private funding and not on public funding, and not what the EU Commission can support in financing, because this is, as you can look at in the previous slides. Thank you very much for this, and welcome for the debate.
Thank you so much, Marek. And now that the scene is set, as he put it, we'll try to gather responses from cluster representatives, and we'll try to see what they're already doing to mix public and private funding, for example, or to get more access to private funding. And I would like to now introduce all of the prominent speakers. We will ask everyone to turn their cameras on, and joining us soon in a second will be director at AVSN, Bianca Ragami. Good morning to you. We will also be joined by the European Project Manager at Finance Innovation, to the cluster, Gisela Sanchez. Good morning. Also joining us, a cluster manager at Ireland Southeast Financial Services Cluster, Katrina Murphy. And last but not least, senior expert at climate and company, Kai Dombrovski. So thank you everyone for joining, and I'll ask each and every one of you one by one to first of all maybe introduce your cluster and to just say a minute or two about what exactly you're doing. And maybe you could also say a couple of sentences or words on what Marek has referred to, the context in which we are in: increased costs, increased interest rates, tighter collateral requirements from banks, if that is something that you are dealing with as well. So let us begin with you, Bianca.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join this panel and to be with you this morning. My name is Bianca Ragami. I'm currently the CEO of the Valencian Cleantech Cluster in Spain. This is a cluster gathering 300 public and private stakeholders in the cleantech industry. We gather out of these 300 organizations, 160 are businesses that gather 7,500 green jobs. We co-lead the energy transition in the Valencian region and beyond. And regarding to the topic of today, I think it's of utmost importance. I've been director of this cluster for 10 years now. And since the beginning, I thought that the missing key of running efficiently a cluster is to find innovative ways in which to develop a financial self-sustainability of the cluster, because that actually opens up to multiple value propositions to multiple stakeholders, and actually that makes the cluster flourish in different ways. So I'm happy to be with you this morning and to be able to expand on this, on such a topic that is of, as I said, an imperative today at European cluster landscape and of utmost importance for all us cluster managers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. I hope you will share those innovative ways, one or two of them, in just a second. Let's hear from all of the other speakers as well. Katrina, could you introduce what you are doing and maybe mention a couple of words about the innovative ways, if you have any, to finance your cluster?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Katrina Murphy. I'm from Ireland Southeast Financial Services Cluster. So we're a very new cluster. We're 3 years operating, and financial services as a whole would be unusual to talk to each other. So we found core pain points and brought them together. So we're 3 years in, we've 70 now across our cluster network. And I suppose I'm here with the perception of listening to what the needs are, because we're fortunate to have such a universal service in our cluster, and to be able to bring that back to our cluster members themselves, and to try and create packages and create services that can be shared internationally, some of whom do so already in quite a successful manner. And we'll talk further about maybe skin in the game for cluster members. I think that has been the most important part, of which I have experienced anyway, and where they can take ownership of the actual projects and events themselves. Also monetizing those services that the clusters actually provide, those member services, because we've got such a universal service there. And then we'll tell you a little bit more about some case studies that we have, but also An innovative idea that I'm calling out on that I'd like to learn more, but today, I don't have answers today. I'd like to listen today and hear what we should be pulling together. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Gisela.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. And thank you also for having us, well, having me in this panel. So I am Gisela Sanchez. I am head of European projects and consulting companies within finance innovation. We are a French cluster. We are based in Paris, and we gather around 600 members. And the typology of the members is also very diverse as many clusters. So we have around 400 SMEs. Around 100 corporates of large companies, and the rest are also a mixture of some investors, and I think this is the topic of today, but also consulting firms, and also the research and academic sector. So we have been created we have existed for a while. So we have also implemented some special ways to finance ourselves, but also to help our SMEs to raise funds.
So it's not just connecting clusters to private financing, but also connecting cluster members to private
Yes.
financing, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
We can discuss this afterwards, but we have implemented some actions on this.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Kai, you are not a cluster, you are not a cluster representative. You represent a sustainable finance think tank, and you consult on strategic and sustainable finance. What do you notice? Do companies know about sources of finance other than public financing?
The thing is that we, as you said, are a think tank on sustainable finance and also a consultancy in terms of sustainability strategy. And what we see is that obviously, as we all know, the sustainability transformation is ongoing. We're in the implementation phase of that. And more and more businesses, as well as financial institutions, also see the importance of that, partly driven by regulation as well. So what we see, obviously, is that the way that companies and clusters in this context also can present their own sustainability strategies moving forward to investors, to private finance, that this is playing an ever increasing role and is going to be more so in the coming years as well. And I can add some input and contribute some on that side of how we view it, that this is an important element also in accessing finance and sort of creating this, filling this space and connecting the space between private finance and businesses or clusters in that case as well.
And would you maybe say a couple of words about the context that Marek has mentioned, the increased costs, increased interest rates? There was a chart, in the context, and basically tighter collateral requirements from banks as well, that tighter and more tense situation as it seems from the survey. Do you also get a feel of that in your daily work?
Well, what it leads to apparently, which is kind of a difficult situation, I believe, is that businesses obviously and understandably view their short-term restrictions in the field that they operate in as more pressing than the action that they have to take in terms of sustainability transition. And but as we know, and as also business leaders know, there's always this kind of difficult situation where you have to deal with the medium and long-term efforts, as well as with the short-term difficulties that you have in terms of restrictions, rising prices, supply chain situations, and stuff like that. So this is something that we feel there's a reluctance still sometimes to really tackle this. Of course, this is also paired with some issues of not having built up the expertise yet to the point where businesses feel comfortable of knowing how to navigate this transition, the transition years coming ahead.
do you feel that the level of expertise is growing day by day, or is it?
Well, the level of expertise is growing, but it's not growing rapidly enough from our perspective. I mean, I've seen, just coming on, comments of a lot of clusters that are related also to sustainability topics. So I believe there is a lot of knowledge and expertise also present in this call. But looking to the broader picture, there's still a lot to be done, and it needs to be done rapidly to build this up, because businesses have to start moving now. This can all be just a gradual transition for sure. Nothing can happen all at once, but we all have to get going, get started, and find a way of how to sort of enter into this transition implementation phase.
Okay, thank you for that. And let us try to get into these examples in greater detail. Some of you have mentioned that you are using innovative sources to fund. And in order to start this awareness raising and to delve into this discussion, let's get this conversation going by maybe sharing specific examples of the funding sources that you are using. And it has been stressed and emphasized so many times that we try not to focus on public funding this time, but private funding. And some of you have mentioned in your introduction speeches that you are using some innovative ways. So let us share the funding sources that you are using to finance your cluster activities, if you're a cluster, or your members. And I think, Bianca, we will start with you. I noted that you said it's 160, I think, companies, and you said some innovative ways. Could you list some of those?
Yes, certainly. Thank you very much. First of all, let me say that I fully agree with Kai. I think it's in this uncertain times, we need more than ever to deep dive into new funding sources. And I think that the clusters have a key role here, because we have a multiplied effect towards the whole ecosystem. And indeed, yeah, these days we do see that we need to orchestrate the velocity of change, and we need to get to that speed and to that scale, and definitely private funding sources and tapping into them effectively is helping us. In terms of the ways to do it from a cluster perspective, and based on my experience, already 10 years ago when I started as a cluster manager, I actually found that the region had actually terminated the funding for the cluster organizations. So therefore, my cluster, which before that was very subsidy reliant, because it's this how it started actually, saw the need to reinvent itself and to tap into new funding sources. And there were a few ways in which actually I created a turnaround up to getting the cluster to reach the level of being financially self-sustained cluster. So 100% private funding. Today, the cluster is a mix of public and funding, private funding, like 70%.
I think we lost you for a moment. Was it just me, or can anyone hear Bianca? No, we cannot. Yes, we lost her. Okay, I hope that she will rejoin, but as far as I understood, the idea was for a self-sustainable financially cluster, and then she ended where she said that 70%, so I guess that's maybe 70% private financing and then the rest public funds, but she can clarify. Let us move to you, Katrina. I know that you said that you mostly wanted to listen about what the needs are and to learn more, but then you also mentioned some skin in the game for cluster members. Could you maybe say a couple of words on that?
Thank you very much. Yeah, so look, we're the largest cohort outside of Dublin in terms of financial services in the region, but what our real true mix here is Indigenous firms. So we're really fortunate to have all of the mindsets of Indigenous firms, some of whom are unicorns, One is Transformate. It's the latest unicorn in Ireland, and it's the first female-led unicorn in Ireland. So the minds that are around me are amazing, and they are the minds who are carving the path now in an industry that has changed so much in the last 3 to 5 years. So having this universal service industry to be able to plug into whatever sector you are, my ask today is reach out to me, tell me where your pain points are, and let me put it to the team that are going to be able to put together packages, put together different technologies and so forth. And in some cases they have it, but skin in the game in our own cluster, from my own experience, we are 100% fully funded by the 5 local authorities. And it was very much a test bed to see, let's see, will they engage? And it's proven itself now. And we've developed various different services without costs at the moment. But a strategic decision was made where the big ask was to create an innovative structure, somewhere that they could, I want to use the word sandbox because that's what everyone's going to relate to when it comes to regulation and financial services, but a place where they can convene and get ideas together. So we're creating a FinTech Centre of Excellence, but we've decided to do this outside of the structure of the cluster itself. So I do think that sometimes cluster managers and cluster strategic parties need to look at how they're actually breaking down their business and decide on, is that right for it to be housed in the structure of the cluster? What is the defined business model of that cluster, or should we have it separated? We chose to separate it because I felt I could get more ownership from the firms that I needed to participate in this. So the firms involved are putting in close to 5 million into this fund for us to develop this. And there will be other public funds that will come towards it. But the real fund that we want to look at is this capital seed fund for those who want to develop their ideas. And I'm really looking forward to what Giselle is going to be telling us about as well, because that's going to be huge learning. But that's what I mean by skin in the game. Having our members take ownership of that prevalent part. They've identified the need and they are running the ship there, specifically the industry members who are, yes, we are very much a holistic ecosystem, but they are putting their own pockets deeply into them and putting it out there. And overall, it fits in with our strategy for the region and lots of other boxes are ticked. But monetizing our cluster member service has been one of the things that we've looked at very closely. And we have referral systems that are running. So very simple QR codes, you know, make it really, really easy. And it's small percentages, but when they multiply effect, happens, it's really working very, very well for us. So one particular product that we have, and I mean, when I talk about fintech, I'm talking payments, I'm talking trading, I'm talking banking, lending, like it's multiplied now in the number of categories that the firms that are listening today can plug into there's a long list of them, I suppose. But accelerated payments, and Kai mentioned this already, for an SME who is starting out, and it's a high-paced, high energy, and demands are there in terms of their cash flow management. They are invoicing, but maybe not getting payments out so quickly. So a solution in which that we've been really working well with for SMEs is accelerated payments. It is a cluster member, and we created this referral system, and they have it there on their website as well. So any cluster manager here today can go on and have a look at accelerated payments and set themselves up as a referral system today and be able to monetize some of that. So that's one area, and their service is to look at cash flow, build the business, improve the bottom line. That's all what we all want to have, even if we're a cluster or a company. That's exactly what we all want. So you can implement it to your own cluster funds. So where you have been awarded funding, but you're struggling with the cash flow, and where you have been awarded business, but you're struggling to manufacture whatever that may be. So this opportunity of monetizing our services within has been, and reaching out to other parties like ourselves who can monetize those. So, and like it's, in particular, it's been the SMEs who have favors this high, fast-paced growth and parties who really need that cash flow system at the time. So, and other smaller things that we've looked at.
Okay, let us maybe stop here and just to clarify. when you said about the Center of Excellence, which I understand would you wanted to get more ownership of the farms, for the members to feel more ownership of the farms. In what stage is it in currently?
So we're in a feasibility scoping position at the moment. So we have already identified who's going to build the building. So we won't be using public funding for that. So a full building of 30,000 square foot. Yeah. So like we're at shovel stages here at the moment, but we're building out all of the certain part, like a division of works has taken place in which the cluster's role is to ensure that whatever type of programs we're implementing are correct and meeting with today's trends and needs. And Kai mentioned sustainable finance. We're working with PhDs in our local, so the Southeast Technology University, to ensure that they are today working on programs that can plug into this at the moment. So one of those areas is the sustainability of biodiversity and sustainable finance, and the loss of which was happening there. So linking very much with the SETU and their research programs, poking out now, what do we need if we're to create this technology center where it has a robust testing system. What are those? So it's beyond what we have available to us today. We want to know how it's to plug it in terms of Web3, in terms of quantum security, all of those elements. So what do we need to have? So it's a multiplier effect as well, because we need more than what is actually available to us. So we want to step out with what's the best.
Thank you so much, and also congratulations on the first female-led unicorn, as I understand.
Yeah, it's
really
recent. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah.
And Kai, would you maybe want to comment on that solution, accelerated payments for SMEs that Katrina mentioned? I noticed that you were sort of nodding and wanting to intervene.
No, not specifically. More that actually Katrina mentioned also the sustainable finance issue, or the connection there with biodiversity topics. This is right. That I find that a great development of how sort of these different fields are also taken into account and are already, being used to make those connections to finance as well.
I think we've got Bianca back, and Bianca, you mentioned that 10 years ago you were completely subsidy reliant, and then you saw the need to reinvent yourselves, and then you turned into a cluster or an organization that is 70% private funding and then 30% public funding. And how is it working now? Would you maybe share that?
Right. So first step was basically to develop a go-to-member strategy and to develop a tailored action plan in which actually we nailed all the needs of the members, and then we connected the dots. And based on that, we managed to have the members very committed. And also based on that, by looking at their specific needs, we also developed new services. So we had members as a paying customers on top of their membership fees. Not only we had them involved and the cluster was continuing to run, but also they were basically demanding from us new services. Like, for example, we organized international missions. We developed studies of market intelligence for specific subsectors, specific companies. Or we organized a working group, for example, more recently on photovoltaics, because there's an issue in the region, so there's a demand there, and actually the members pay a double fee because there's an extra commitment from the team of our cluster in providing these services, and that all contributed to building a new revenue streams for the cluster, and to get more members more committed, more demanding for more services, and basically to get more private funding in the cluster. On top of that, we develop new services not only for the members of the cluster, so for the companies in the sector, but also for third parties, organizations. For example, for banks, which we connected with also to co-design financial schemes for the members with preferential, let's say, financial schemes for specifically for the subsectors of the cluster, we managed to get them on board as sponsors for our events, for example, but also to sponsor even or to collaborate with us in specific projects. For example, recently in building local energy communities hub in the region, we got banks involved because that's basically the main bottleneck in actually leveraging this new energy model in the region. So not only they are connected with the cluster, with the particular project, funding some of the specific activities like events, but also providing and tailoring their financial schemes to the needs of the SMEs in the cluster for a specific subsector. That requires tapping into a more creative approach of working with banks.
But what does that entail exactly when you say we managed to get them involved, not just into the events, but you know, in all of these other sorts of things? And then you say it requires a creative approach. How does that start? Where does it come from? How does does the need?
So basically creating the awareness and bringing bottom-up information from the sector. So that market intelligence that cluster are so comfortable with because they are in contact constantly with the cluster members, we actually brought that information and we created awareness in the banks that there was a business opportunity for them as well, and that there was a need from the sector. So it's like basically joining the dots, the problem owners with the solution providers in order to leverage funding for the cluster. And that has a multiplying benefit, because not only the cluster gets this to work more closely with these banks and gets funding from the banks, but also specifically the SMEs from the cluster get access very directly. One of the, for example, creative, I like to call them like this because it's not business as usual in working with the banks. Actually, when we speak about cluster, it's like we got to work with the banks in creating even let's say one-stop shop, a window of connection with the companies in the energy sector for their financing needs. One of the big bottlenecks at the moment in the energy revolution is getting to that funding. So banks actually created specific stuff, dedicated resources through an agreement that we created with different banks in the region, with the main all the banks basically in the region and our cluster, in order to get to create that direct pathway for the SMEs in the cluster, and that actually speeds up the funding for cluster. And third layer of private funding, and I like to call this the icing on the cake, is actually tapping into the investors. Connecting with the VCs, with the corporate venture capitals, and basically with the business angels. Usually, I know that usually clusters have traditionally not connected too much with the venture capitalists because it was like they were like a world on their own. But lately, clusters are expanding their foundation of triple helix. They don't not only work with academia, with business, and with government, but also they are incorporating startups. They are incorporating accelerators. They're incorporating VCs, CVCs, and business angels. And I think that has a huge added value, not only that it expands the cluster dimension and the cluster stakeholders, and therefore you have more paying members, more paying customers, to say so, but also it actually opens up a whole new series of opportunities in bringing innovation to the cluster and funding that innovation. But of course, in order to have VCs in the cluster, you need to have startups. You need to have valuable startups, because if you magnet startups, you magnet the VCs. So what we did a few years ago is to launch a business idea competition in the climate space. And based on that, we actually triggered the appetite of SMEs, of startups, of entrepreneurs to our cluster. And we actually showcased them to investors. And that's how we magneted investors. Business angels started to be aware that there was something really happening in clean tech, and started to put their energy in that. And we created investment forums. We created cooperation with business angels clusters in the region, and this is how we actually planted the seed to connect with investors. Slowly, these investors actually became part of the cluster itself, and they are even in the board, the management board. And I really advise clusters from Europe to actually tap into this, because it has huge benefits.
Thank you so much. These were many investment sources, investors, banks, venture capital, corporate venture capital. I want to hand over to Gisela and ask if you have successful experience as well. I really like the example about, if you want to have venture capital, then you have to start to have startups, trigger the appetite, and then this is how it all starts. Is that what your experience say as well, Gisela?
Yes, indeed, and I agree with a lot of things that Bianca has said, because we have also learned a lot since from the beginning. Today we are a cluster and we are 90% private, so only 10% is coming from public funding. This has been happening for some years already. So we have also implemented, as Bianca mentioned, we listen a lot our members, and sometimes we have even do a very tailor-made activities, but the fact that we have listened and worked together to create some services has helped a lot. So we have a lot of events that target a specific audience. So it could be banking sector, it could be the insurance sector, it could be the asset management sector, or the real estate. So actually we are divided in 7 verticals within finance innovation, and we just do events to get the community together. But also in this community, we have managed since 4 or 5 years to gather an investor community. So at the beginning, it was natural because we had the corporate, so we start having the CVCs. It was easier, if I can call it like this, and then we started working also with some investor and business angels. So of course we have to how we managed to gather them. It was also giving them the opportunity to meet the startups that were already prepared and that have worked with us. A lot of things before. So everything, the pitch, everything before they just met them. So we were not presenting anyone. We were working with the startups before they will meet them. And we learned this with them. And also we learned that they like to get together. They just like to discuss about investors' opportunities also. So this community that we have created, and this has been working for years, also is for them. Of course, the idea is that we match, that will be the perfect idea, match investor and SME as part of the deal, but also get investors to talk among them. That is also part of what we have done. So we also do a speed meetings, speed matchmaking and speed dating events, so we can really try to match them together and discuss. Maybe it won't be the right timing, but at least they have had the chance to discuss for some time, and then they will call each other when the time is there. We have also developed a lot of communication about this, because the fact that we work and that we are working with startups that are trying to raise funds, we have noticed they have a lot of questions and there is a lot of work to do. So they need a lot of help, and that's how also we connect the consultants and the specialists that work with investors and the startups. So we make a lot of videos with investors, SMEs, and sometimes could be also corporates, to actually give the best practices to address investors. So this is some of the activities that we also work with them.
Thank you for sharing this. And there is a question, I think this is directed to Bianca, but maybe you could say a word on that too. What is the strategy to identify the right investors to connect with? I'm looking to connect the industry-specific investors, not general ones. End of question. Gisela, do you want to say what do you have? You have mentioned, some of the methods and ways, but what is how would you sum it up? The strategy to identify the right investors to connect with.
Yeah, this is it's a good question actually, because it's not that easy. At least in France, we have there are not many only fintech specialized investors, and of course they all have their rules. They all have the way that they want to be addressed. So there is not a magic potion, I will say. This is very hard to say, but actually the entrepreneur has to know really in advance. He has to have worked a lot on their strategy. He or she needs to know who and why he wants to address this investor in particular, and they have learned a little bit how to address this specifically, because they actually are very different one to the other. So I think it will be basically this, just to analyze really who are you targeting and why.
And do you charge a fee to participate in the events? There's an anonymous question to you, Gisela.
Sorry, what was the question?
Do you charge a fee to participate in the events that you mentioned?
Actually, no, part of our business model is that all our members they pay a tuition fee, so everything is included for our members, but for externals participants, yes, they have to pay. Well, also this was also part of the strategy that I mentioned about the fact that we are almost a private organization.
Bianca, would you say a couple of words about the right strategy to get to investors as well?
Well, that's one of the questions that many SMEs have also in our cluster. I think this is the service and a role for cluster managers. As a cluster, you need to target the industry-specific investors and to develop ways in which to bring them on board. On our side, we actually at that time when we, for example, launched the Clean Tech Accelerator in order to find the startups and the talent and bring them on board. Actually, we realized that most of the VCs and investors in Spain in general were very focused on digital and not too much on clean tech. That was already 7, 8 years ago. So we actually started to raise awareness on that and to basically not train them, but to bring them closer and to expose them to the opportunities that the clean tech will bring. And slowly they tapped into it and they put the money into the clean tech, and that's how they also elevated themselves towards and expanded towards clean tech. Another role was basically to find them even in Europe, if there were not too many in Spain at that moment. So whenever we'd organize this event, we would bring them from all over Europe and would organize the pitches in English. And that's how we actually managed to magnet them. I do think that it's a role for clusters. I think that cluster managers should basically make their market studies in who is who in the VC world specific to their sector, and have a coffee with these VCs and ask them if they're interested in this and in that, and get like 3-5 success stories of startups and of businesses and bring them closer to them, so that actually they open up the appetite of them towards the sector. I think it's as easy as that and as difficult as that, because sometimes we are reluctant in talking to these people that talk many times a language and have a vision that is quite different than the vision of the SMEs. But our role as clusters is to bring these worlds together and to make the magic happen. And I think it's just walking the talk with investors, with SMEs, and bringing them together in events. And actually, yeah, clusters are the source.
Thank you so much. Kai, would you maybe take this one about how to connect with the investors, the right investors? Is it just about having, a coffee or two, or does it involve building a more general and a more robust strategy?
Well, I like what Bianca said very much about the role of the clusters in this, how they can actually sort of, for the sectoral group of businesses that are their members, see what the fit is in terms of investors or financing options. What comes to my mind is the role also of such issues as like the taxonomy regulation. I don't know how many clusters or businesses are aware or are concerned about this, but more and more also in financing institutions, banks, they have to consider and integrate the rules of the taxonomy regulation into their processes, into their profiles, to also report on their green asset ratio, so like the share of funding that is in alignment with that. So for many businesses, this is still like a red flag, and they don't just feel that this is a terrible administrative burden. But on the other hand, we would strongly recommend to just get acquainted with the rules that are related to the business and the sector that companies and clusters operate in, and also inquire and get into conversation with those financing institutions to find out how they are integrating this into their funding strategies, into their financing profiles, so that there can be a connection made. And this is something where I would see for the clusters also a great role to do this kind of work, which is difficult for individual businesses sometimes to do, to get acquainted with rules that are relevant for the individual sectors, and to make that connection also on that level to those financing institutions.
We have a comment from Anna Maria saying the strategy in France to attract investors is to participate in different events such as fundraising. Another strategy, grants, BPI, development credits, associations. Katrina, would you have anything to add on the strategy to connect to investors? Because that seems to be a question that interests a lot of participants.
Sure, yeah. Look, do not underestimate the tea coffee sessions that are happening in the background of your events. That is number one. Like, most people will want to know something about the topic of conversation that's there, but it's the tea coffee. And definitely throughout the pandemic, we've learned through the screen, we can definitely, knowledge share has been fantastic, but you miss that chance to be able to say, hey, Kai, you mentioned such and such on taxonomy. Let's sit down because I want to talk to you about an idea I have. And I suppose maybe it comes back to the very basics of your network is your net worth. And that's our biggest mantra across all of clusters. And reinforcing that with members to say, take the time to get to these events. What are you looking for? Research who it is you feel is your VC that you feel is the right person for you, and help them to navigate pathways towards them, which can take time, but it's really worth it. We have done that for parties. And I've mentioned that because we've got such a strong cohort of Indigenous firms now, a lot of those guys are the investors of future startups. So some of the Indigenous groups that are within your cluster could well be absolutely thrilled with a knock on the door to say, hey, did you see this startup over here? Would you mind giving them 20 minutes of your time for them to pitch their idea to you? So we can act as the connector in between. But I'm delighted to hear that Kai talked about EU taxonomy and ESG, because this is something, and I hope Merrick is listening clearly here as well. So carbon credit exchanges is coming to all of us, whether it's SMEs, whether no matter what size of the company it is. And I feel just as the Chamber of Commerce brand took on the certification of origin, certification stamping, I really genuinely feel that clusters across Europe are best placed for the assertion of carbon credit activity, and that we should be playing a part in implementing that activity, educating towards that activity, and also having some form of a centralized certification system, no doubt blockchain enabled. And I see some of our friends from BCCS in Lithuania are on the call here as well. Delighted to see them. But, I think the future of what's next as clusters, we need to box more cleverly together and collaborate through the ECCP to create new services to future-proof ourselves. And I feel taxonomy, ESG and carbon credits is one way to do that. And I'd love to open the door to see who's on board to try and dig through that.
Thank you. These are some very important aspects. And in general, cluster to cluster collaboration in terms of finding out and knowing about the financing sources, maybe that is a measure that has been unused. What are other ways to find out about the financing sources for, let's say, clusters and their members? Let's say I'm a cluster that has been publicly funded and I want to begin somewhere, but I don't know where. Where do I begin looking for those sources? How do I start the process going? We have talked already about investors and about venture capitals, but how do I know in general about all of these unused sources? Would anyone help me? Bianca?
Well, on my side, based on my experience of creating the financially self-sustained cluster, I developed a manual that is available online. Maybe that can help clusters. It's available on clustersofchange.eu. And there's a cluster manual, basically, that you can download for free, and you can see ways in which you can tap into this. Now, I'm sure that from the ECCP, they are disseminating also these ways, and maybe even more after this session this morning. And I hope that that can actually inspire clusters to really become conscious that the way forward in developing and creating transformational projects and becoming transformational themselves is definitely by moving away from the subsidy reliant approach. We see also with the Next Generation EU funds, with the transformational projects, that it is required to have a mix of funding streams. And if you have not developed a robust cluster model before, that is very difficult. It's a difficult journey. Everything that I'm creating at this moment of value is based off the fact that actually I managed to get the members paying a fee for services, and therefore to see the value that the cluster brings is because we've managed with the team to connect with third parties, to pay services and to find value in the cluster. And it's because we engaged meaningfully with VCs, business angels, and other investment organizations that look at the cluster at the hotspot for clean tech innovation and the go-to place for them. If you manage to magnet all these and to orchestrate them, then you can elevate your impact as a cluster, and you can tap into transformational projects like, for example, manufacturing in EU, bringing investors and connecting several SMEs and corporates in order to manufacture in Europe, which is exactly what is being wanted now from the Europe, and specifically in the clean tech. And we have stories about this in the region now. Everything that we need to do is based on a robust cluster business model. And a cluster business and business model in general, as we know, is how we deliver value to stakeholders so that they actually pay. Yeah, it involves the financial model, but it's a bit broader. Now, a cluster business model means how we deliver value to multiple types of stakeholders, delivering multiple experiments and managing to magnet multiple streams of funding sources. And that is mainly private funding sources. And the last comment here, this is a topic very close to my heart because I lived it on my own skin, and I created actually a turnaround in the cluster with a wonderful team and with the ecosystem. But basically we created it out of thin air. We didn't have public funding. And I think that this story is compelling enough so that any cluster in Europe thinks that it is possible. You just need to become conscious that and also becoming aware that the public funding is not the low-hanging fruit. The public funding sometimes can be a trap where you can fall in and you can get there and you lose connection sometimes with the reality, with the business, with the members, with the trends. You forget to compare and to contrast. You don't have the full market intelligence. But the low-hanging fruit, my view, is that it's actually the private funding. If you tap into that meaningfully, then a whole new world comes. And your job is exciting, you create transformation, and everybody is happy and proud becoming part of this change.
Thank you so much for being so enthusiastic and for giving us this quote that the new low-hanging fruit is private funding, actually not the public funding. For the ending remarks, Gisela, would you also want to maybe touch upon what Katrina said about the taxonomy and carbon credit exchange, that cluster is the best place for the assertion of carbon credit activity, and she says that we need to box cleverly together. Would you agree with that?
Totally. Yes, I totally agree with Katrina, what Katrina said about this. I think that we can work together. This a topic that will impact all of us. So so I think that the exchange the best practice and just develop projects through the ECCP using the ECCP portal or other tools. It will be a great idea actually, and a great project for us, for the clusters in general.
Kai, to wrap up, we have just learned that we should be focusing on public, not the public funding, which can be a trap, as Bianca has put it, but actually the private funding, because it's a new low-hanging fruit. Would you agree with that as well, and encourage everyone to follow up on that if you agree with them?
Yes, I would, and particularly since I'm coming and looking at this from the sustainability transformation side of things, right? So, and this is something that is, of course, in the past years has coming to attention and being implemented also by financing institutions, by investors all around the world. And they are looking for businesses that can demonstrate and showcase that they do know how to navigate this transformational sustainability change. So this is something that where I see a big role for clusters also, even though I'm not involved in one myself, but where they can actually support the businesses in doing this. Maybe if I can sort of say like 3 things that I believe that clusters can support businesses, them is making them aware to prepare in terms of getting started, even though it's a gradual and not challenging way to navigate this sustainability transformation, finding out what in the specific sectors are those relevant steps that have to be taken to sort of get there in terms of own operations, in terms of value chain and supply chains. There's a lot that can be done there. Developing those kinds of strategies is looking forward, but also, which I feel is very important, creating best practice cases, templates, etc., to be able to showcase how you see your navigation, your strategy moving forward. This is something that can very much help businesses to make that connection with investors, with private finance, and they are looking for those opportunities as well.
Thank you. And Katrina, for your final remark, would you agree with that? Creating best practice cases to be able to showcase and that private funding should be the new low-hanging fruit.
I like that. Yeah, I often find if we stand back and we look at the amount of hours that we've put into applications and collaborating to get them together, and by nurturing our experience and say relationships with individual C-suite cluster members, where when you're putting in value, they want to give you the money because they want to see it working. And I really see clusters are soft sales tools. We're so easy to open the doors, guys. If you can just sit back and look at what door can't you open for your member and use yourself as a soft sale tool. And like an example of that for us this week alone, we've got National Workplace Wellbeing Week. Okay, so this Friday is a big event in Ireland, and it's a celebration of workplace health and well-being. And as part of that, financial well-being is a component of that. So I went to and discussed this with one of my top members, taxback.com. And Taxback were happy to offer a 10% discount to every cluster member that I have. An easy email went out. All of their members are made aware of, there's an event happening this week about well-being. Financial well-being is part of that. here's an offering, and they get 4 years free review. For anybody in Europe, you can go on and use this as well. You're happy to, I'll send you the link of the, and it's a simple QR code or text messaging system that they can use. So, and easy to engage, easy to measure, monetize that engagement if you can, and we are soft sales too. So I 100% agree with looking at low-hanging fruit and other areas outside of the private funds.
Thank you, Katrina. You said in the beginning that you're here to listen, but you have provided us with many really deep and valuable insights as well. So thank you so much for this, and thank you all the panelists. It's been really great. Thank you for your enthusiasm and for your examples and for your ideas. Thank you everybody who has been writing their questions. Some we have managed to answer. Thank you for being so interactive, and thank you for participating. And I will now hand over to Nina for more finance opportunities.
Many thanks, Jivile, and many thanks to all of you, to the panelists. I've been following closely, very interesting indeed. Just for the final remarks for the remaining minutes of the cluster talk, if you want to look at more in depth into access to finance, what the European Commission does, Marek already, of course, mentioned in the introduction. There's a web page from the Access to Finance Unit that you can look into, since they support small business access to various sources of financing, either by regulatory initiatives, raising awareness, or exchanging best practices, as we've just heard, on either loans and guarantees, venture capital, business angels, growth stock markets, crowdfunding, fintech, blockchain. So you see here the link on the slide and in the chat. So continue looking at this to tap into access to financing. And what I also want to mention, there are currently a lot of opportunities for SMEs open with a cascade funding approach, meaning that clusters channel funds and give them based on call to finance innovation projects, to finance trainings, to finance upskilling in different areas. By so the Euro clusters, the flagship initiative currently on cluster networks, have opened several calls, for example, in food processing, as you can see here, agri-food, energy-intensive industries, creative and cultural industries, digital technologies, textiles, tourism, with all different deadlines. Everything is published on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So in case your members, the SMEs, are interested in calls, you can have a look in detail and look at them with them together. There are, as you see, also opportunities in the blue economy, in aerospace and defense, photonics, furniture and living sector, lighting, microelectronics, social enterprise, urban agriculture, and the financial support to new products, green and digital transition, and internationalization. So please have a look at this. Many different opportunities with some funding for the SMEs. And with that, back to you, Judah.
Thank you, Nina. And there is a question, if the slides will be distributed to everyone, maybe you could say a couple of words on that.
So these will be published on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform on the page of this talk afterwards, as well as the recording. So you can access the information afterwards.
Okay, thank you. So that answers Ulrike's question, and thank you for that question. Thank you, Nina, for the opportunities for SMEs and all of the other financial opportunities. And I just want to remind everybody that the dialogue can continue on LinkedIn, European Cluster Collaboration Platform. It's a rather new group that you can join and discuss everything that is relevant. If you have more concerns or examples that you want to share, if you just want to learn about other members, do participate in that LinkedIn group, ECCP, General Discussion Group, European Cluster Collaboration Platform. So this is where the dialogue can continue moments after this session is over, which is nearly over. I will just remind you of the next talks, which you can register for on the 3rd of May. transition pathway on construction, 17th of May, transition pathway on textiles, and then another one on the 31st of May, patent package. So you can register, the links are all in the chat. You can register to attend the next talks. You can do it any second now, and do register on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform as well. You can scan the barcode that you can see, or you can do it the more traditional or old-fashioned way, whichever you prefer. Do register on the European Cluster Collaboration Platform if you have not done so yet. And I think that's it. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you that so many of you have joined and asked their questions. I wish you productive week, productive collaboration, and have a good rest of the week, and see you next time. Thank you.